3 Super Bowls, 2 franchises that defined excellence, 20 Hall of Famers across both rosters. And yet, when the final whistle blew on their 3rd championship clash, both teams walked away convinced they were the better dynasty. This is the story of Pittsburgh and Dallas. Blue collar versus glamour, grit versus polish, the steel curtain versus America's team. They didn't just play football, they waged war over the soul of the NFL itself. The rivalry didn't begin with glory, it began with mockery. September 1960, Cotton Bowl, Dallas. A brand new expansion franchise called the Cowboys took the field for their inaugural game against a Pittsburgh team that hadn't won anything meaningful in decades. And the celebration afterward felt cruel. Cowboys players and fans were mocked for their struggles, treated like children wandering onto a field designed for professionals. But humiliation has a way of fueling obsession. Tom Landry stood on the sideline that day, a former defensive coordinator turned head coach, watching his team get dismantled. He wore his signature fedora and stone-cold expression, a man who looked like he'd never smiled in his life. Landry wasn't just building a football team, he was engineering a system. His revolutionary Flex 4-3 defense wasn't designed for brute force. It was designed for precision, intelligence, calculated chaos. He didn't need the biggest players, he needed the smartest ones. Across the conference, Pittsburgh was drowning in mediocrity. The Steelers had existed since 1933 and had exactly 0 championships to show for it. They were the league's punching bag, the team that couldn't draft, couldn't win, couldn't escape their own incompetence. But in 1969, everything changed. Chuck Noll arrived. A former linebacker turned assistant coach, Noll had studied under the great Sid Gilman, whom he called one of the game's prime researchers and offensive specialists. Noll didn't have Landry's polished image. He had something more dangerous, ruthlessness. His first team meeting before the 1970 season became legendary. Noll looked at his roster and told them the brutal truth. The reason you've been losing is you're not any good. You're not fast enough. You're not strong enough. You're not quick enough. You're not smart enough. I'm going to have to get rid of most of you. And Noll meant every word. He wasn't bluffing. Bodies were cut. Egos were destroyed. The old Steelers were annihilated, replaced by a new breed of player who understood one simple truth: win or disappear. But Noll needed a foundation, someone to build around, someone who could set the tone for everything that followed. Joe Green arrived in 1969, a defensive tackle from North Texas State who later admitted, "I did not want to be a Steeler." Pittsburgh was a wasteland, a franchise graveyard. Green wanted to play anywhere else, but fate doesn't care what anyone wants. Green was massive, volatile, relentless. His nickname was Mean Joe Green, and he earned it by playing with the kind of fury that terrified offensive linemen. During a 1974 AFC Championship game against Oakland, Green became so emotionally charged that he kicked Jim Otto in the groin, then threw him to the ground with one arm before sacking the quarterback. Officials didn't know whether to eject him or just get out of his way. But Green wasn't just mean, he was brilliant. He weaponized a defensive tactic called the Stunt 4-3, lining up at a sharp angle between the guard and center, disrupting blocking assignments before the snap even happened. Coaches were skeptical. Green insisted. They let him try it in a division championship game. It worked. The steel curtain was born. Green later reflected, "I just want people to remember me as being a good player and not really mean. I want to be remembered for playing 13 years and contributing to 4 championship teams." But in 1970, those championships felt impossible. Meanwhile, in Dallas, Landry was assembling something special. At quarterback, he had Roger Staubach, a Navy officer who'd spent years serving his country before joining the Cowboys. Staubach was everything Landry wanted: controlled, cerebral, unshakable. He didn't panic, he calculated. But Staubach also had something Landry didn't expect: the ability to create magic out of chaos. In 1975, during a playoff game against Minnesota, Staubach threw a desperation pass downfield with seconds remaining. When asked about it afterward, he shrugged and said, "I threw the ball and said a Hail Mary." The phrase became legendary. Captain Comeback was born. The Steelers had their enforcer, the Cowboys had their magician. Both teams were building something unstoppable, but only one could be the dynasty of the decade. And their first battle on the sport's biggest stage would create a personal hatred that would burn for years. January 18th, 1976, Miami, the Orange Bowl, Super Bowl X. The steel curtain versus America's team. Two franchises that had clawed their way to dominance, meeting for the first time when everything was on the line. Pittsburgh arrived as defending champions, battle-tested and brutal. Terry Bradshaw had evolved from a Louisiana gunslinger with a cannon arm into a legitimate quarterback. He still threw like he was trying to kill someone, but now he had precision to match his power. Flanking him were Lynn Swann and John Stallworth, two deep threat receivers who could turn any play into a touchdown. But Swann almost didn't play. 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, Swann suffered a concussion. His head throbbed, his vision blurred. Doctors warned him about the risks of taking another hit. Then Cowboys safety Cliff Harris decided to add fuel to the fire. Harris told reporters, "I'm not going to hurt anyone intentionally, but getting hit again while he's running a pass route must be in the back of Swann's mind. I know it would be in the back of my mind." Swann was vulnerable. Swann was scared. But Lynn Swann didn't scare easily. "I'm still not 100%, Swann said before the game. "I value my health, but I've had no dizzy spells." I read what Harris said. He was trying to intimidate me. He said I'd be afraid out there. He needn't worry. He doesn't know Lynn Swann. He can't scare me or the team. He continued, "Sure, I thought about the possibility of being re-injured, but it's like being thrown by a horse. You have to get up and ride again immediately, or you may be scared the rest of your life." Swann wasn't just playing. He was making a statement. Meanwhile, in Dallas, the Cowboys weren't intimidated either. They had their own weapons. Staubach had become the league's most clutch quarterback, a man who specialized in fourth-quarter miracles. Drew Pearson provided a reliable receiving target, and the Dallas defense, anchored by Cliff Harris and built on Landry's flex scheme, had proven they could shut down anyone. The game was violent and tight from the opening drive. Pittsburgh jumped ahead early. Bradshaw connected with Swann for highlight reel catches that defied physics. Swann soared, twisted, snatched passes out of the air like a man possessed. Harris's trash talk had backfired spectacularly. But Dallas fought back. Staubach drove the Cowboys downfield, methodically picking apart Pittsburgh's defense. The game stayed close. Every possession felt like a referendum on which team truly deserved to be called the best. Then came the moment that defined the rivalry's intensity. Steelers kicker Roy Gerela missed a field goal. As he walked off the field, dejected, Cowboys safety Cliff Harris jogged over and mockingly patted Gerela on the helmet. "Thanks for helping Dallas out," Harris said with a smirk, but the cracks were starting to show. Jack Lambert saw it. Lambert was Pittsburgh's middle linebacker, a gap-toothed enforcer who played with the kind of rage that made offensive coordinators redesign their playbooks. He wasn't just mean, he was protective. And years later, when Hollywood Henderson would run his mouth before Super Bowl XIII, Lambert would remember this exact moment. The moment he learned that disrespecting a Steeler had consequences. Lambert sprinted over and shoved Harris to the ground. Officials surrounded them. Flags flew. Lambert could have been ejected, ending Pittsburgh's defensive anchor and potentially costing them the championship. But the officials made a decision. Lambert stayed. No one touched a Steeler again. But Dallas still had a chance. With seconds remaining, Staubach launched it. Edwards picked it. Game over. Pittsburgh 21, Dallas 17. The Steelers had won their second consecutive Super Bowl. Swann, the man who'd played through a concussion and humiliated Cliff Harris, was named Super Bowl MVP. But as the confetti fell, both teams left Miami unsatisfied. Dallas walked off that field convinced they'd been the better team, that a few plays had been the difference. Landry's expression never changed. His eyes said it all. This isn't finished. And Pittsburgh? They had defended their title, but Dallas departed convinced the margin was luck. They were right. What neither team realized was that the next time they met on this stage, the insults would escalate beyond physical shoves. They would attack the very character of the men themselves. 3 years later, the collision course was set again. Pittsburgh steamrolled through the 1978 season, finishing 14-2. The Steel Curtain defense, led by Joe Green, Jack Lambert, and Mel Blount, remained the most feared unit in football. But now, they had something new, an offense that could match their defensive prowess. Terry Bradshaw had transformed into a surgical passer with a cannon arm. In 1978, he completed 207 passes for 2,915 yards and 28 touchdowns against just 20 interceptions. Numbers that killed the dumb gunslinger narrative for good. Career bests. Those numbers represented a complete transformation from the uncertain gunslinger who'd been benched and doubted earlier in his career. But those doubts about his intelligence, his decision-making, his worthiness still lingered in the press, still stung. Lynn Swann and John Stallworth gave Bradshaw two devastating deep threats. Franco Harris provided a punishing ground game. Pittsburgh crushed Miami 34-14 in the divisional round, then demolished Houston 27-13 in the AFC Championship. Meanwhile, in Dallas, the Cowboys had spent 3 years stewing over Super Bowl X, 3 years replaying Jack Lambert's shove of Cliff Harris, 3 years wondering what would have happened if just 1 or 2 plays had gone differently. Tom Landry had retooled the roster. Roger Staubach was still Captain Comeback, still performing fourth-quarter miracles. Tony Dorsett, the electric running back from Pittsburgh, gave Dallas a home run threat on every carry. And the defense, anchored by Harvey Martin, Randy White, and the trash-talking linebacker Thomas Hollywood Henderson, believed they were built to stop anyone. Dallas finished 12-4, which meant they'd have to survive on the road. But their playoff run was brutal. They escaped Atlanta 27-20 in the divisional round. Then came the NFC Championship against the Los Angeles Rams. And then, Hollywood Henderson opened his mouth. Henderson was Dallas's flamboyant outside linebacker, a man who played with swagger and backed it up with big hits. He loved the spotlight, loved the cameras, loved making headlines. In the week leading up to Super Bowl XIII, Henderson sat down with reporters and delivered a quote that would define the game before it even started. Headlines were already getting louder. Terry Bradshaw couldn't spell cat if you spotted him the C and the T. The insult spread like wildfire. Newspapers printed it. Television broadcasts replayed it. Bradshaw, who'd spent his entire career fighting perceptions about his intelligence because of his Louisiana drawl and good old boy demeanor, heard it everywhere he went. Tom Landry cringed when he learned what Henderson had said. "I cringed when I heard that," Landry later admitted, "because I did not feel that Bradshaw needed additional motivation in a big game like the Super Bowl." Landry understood what Henderson apparently didn't. You don't give a Hall of Fame quarterback bulletin board material before the biggest game of the year. But Bradshaw didn't respond publicly. He didn't fire back with his own insults. He simply smiled for the cameras and said he was focused on football. Privately, though, the insult burned like a white-hot fury. Chuck Noll weaponized it. In team meetings, Noll reminded his players about the disrespect. He told them Dallas thought Pittsburgh was dumb, slow, predictable. He told them the Cowboys believed they were the smarter, better team. And when the Steelers took the field for pregame warm-ups, they carried that insult with them like armor. January 21st, 1979, Miami, the Orange Bowl, Super Bowl XIII. This was the Super Bowl that decided the decade. The Steelers were chasing the 3rd championship in 5 years. The Cowboys were defending champions. Whoever won this game would cement themselves as the team of the 70s. The first half was chaos. Bradshaw threw touchdown passes. Staubach answered with his own. The defenses, supposedly the best in football, couldn't stop either offense. Points piled up. Pittsburgh scored first. Bradshaw connected with John Stallworth for a 28-yard touchdown. The Steel Curtain fans roared. Dallas answered immediately. Staubach hit Tony Hill for a touchdown. The game was tied. Back and forth they went. Bradshaw threw another touchdown. Pittsburgh led 14-7, but Dallas refused to fold. Staubach marched the Cowboys into the red zone and fired a touchdown pass to tie the game at 14. The defenses, the Steel Curtain and the Flex, were supposed to dominate. Instead, they were being shredded. The second half started with more devastation. Bradshaw threw another touchdown. Dallas answered. The score climbed, 21-14, 21-17, and then came the play that would haunt Dallas for decades. 3rd and 3, Cowboys trailing by 4. Dallas had the ball, driving for what could be the go-ahead touchdown. Staubach dropped back and saw Jackie Smith, the Hall of Fame tight end who'd waited his entire career for this moment, break wide open in the end zone. Smith had spent 15 years with the St. Louis Cardinals, a brilliant tight end on mediocre teams. He'd never played in a Super Bowl, never won a championship, never had his moment. Dallas had signed him specifically for this playoff run, for this moment. Staubach threw. The pass floated through the air, wobbling slightly yet right on the money as Smith settled under it. Alone in the end zone, the championship materializing in his hands. Contact. The leather touched his palms, rested there, and bounced away. Smith collapsed on the turf, arms spread like a man watching his life flash before his eyes. The crowd never reacted. The Cowboys settled for a field goal. Instead of taking the lead, they still trailed. Jackie Smith never played another down of professional football. But even that crushing moment couldn't stop Dallas. Pittsburgh extended their lead. Bradshaw threw his fourth touchdown pass of the game, this time to Lynn Swann, the receiver who'd humiliated Dallas in Super Bowl X. The Steelers led 35-17. Dallas still had one last punch. At 35-17, Dallas needed two miracles. But Staubach launched one final relentless assault. He drove Dallas downfield, threading passes through Pittsburgh's defense like a man possessed. He hit Billy Joe Dupree for a touchdown. Then after Dallas recovered an onside kick, he immediately drove the Cowboys into scoring position again. With just over 2 minutes remaining, Staubach threw another touchdown pass. The score was 35-31. Dallas had somehow clawed back into the game. The Orange Bowl exploded with noise. Cowboys fans screamed they had a chance. Dallas attempted another onside kick. If they recovered, Staubach would have one final opportunity to complete the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history. The ball tumbled forward. Pittsburgh recovered. The Steelers ran out the clock. The game was over. Pittsburgh 35, Dallas 31. The Steelers had done it. 3 championships in 5 years. Terry Bradshaw, the man who supposedly couldn't spell cat, had thrown for 318 yards and 4 touchdowns. A Super Bowl record. In a Super Bowl. Against the defending champions. He was named Super Bowl MVP. When reporters asked Bradshaw about Henderson's comments, he simply smiled and said, "Ask if he can spell MVP." But while Pittsburgh celebrated, Dallas walked off the field as the first defending champion to lose in the Super Bowl. The first losing team to score more than 30 points. Every statistic felt like salt in a wound, because even 30 points hadn't been enough. Tom Landry's expression never changed. But in the locker room, players whispered about next time, about redemption. Jackie Smith sat alone, still processing the drop that would define his career. Hollywood Henderson, the trash talker who'd motivated Pittsburgh, was eerily quiet. The rivalry had produced 2 of the greatest Super Bowls in history. The 1970s belonged to Pittsburgh, but the Cowboys weren't finished. Not even close. As both teams boarded planes to return home, the rivalry slipped out of the spotlight. Different seasons, different problems, different eras. The 1980s were supposed to continue the dominance. Instead, they became a cautionary tale about mortality. Chuck Noll, the ruthless architect who transformed Pittsburgh from laughingstock to dynasty, made a decision that would haunt him forever. In the 1983 draft, the Steelers needed a quarterback. Local product Dan Marino, a Pittsburgh native who'd grown up idolizing the Steel Curtain, was available. Noll passed. A rumor, never verified, unsubstantiated, cruel, and ultimately false, suggested Marino had substance issues. Noll believed it. Instead of Marino, the Steelers selected nose tackle Gabe Rivera. Marino went to Miami. He threw for 5,000 yards as a rookie and became one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, while Pittsburgh spent the next decade searching for half that production. Rivera's career ended in a car accident before his second season. The Steel Curtain was aging. Joe Green, the foundation of everything, was slowing down. His body couldn't sustain the fury anymore. By 1981, he'd played his final game. Terry Bradshaw's elbow gave out. The rocket arm that had terrorized defenses for over a decade couldn't throw anymore. He retired in 1983, leaving a void Pittsburgh couldn't fill. Pittsburgh's dominance evaporated. Meanwhile, in Dallas, Tom Landry was losing his edge. The flex defense that had revolutionized football was now predictable. The innovations that once made him unstoppable were being exploited by younger, hungrier coaches. In 1988, both Landry and Noll appeared together on a Sports Illustrated cover with the headline questioning whether they'd lost their touch. Both teams finished with losing records. The dynasties that had defined the 1970s were collapsing in real time. Roger Staubach had already retired in 1979, walking away at the peak of his powers. When asked about retiring at 37, he said, "I couldn't have retired at my age and just played golf. First of all, they didn't pay quarterbacks what they do today, and I was 37 with 3 kids." The empire was crumbling, not from external forces, but from internal decay. Both franchises spent the late 1980s wandering in the wilderness, searching for answers that felt impossible to find. The rivalry wasn't dead, just dormant. And in 1995, fate gave them one more chance to settle the score. 17 years after Super Bowl XIII, they met again. January 28, 1996, Tempe, Arizona, Super Bowl XXX. This was supposed to be Pittsburgh's redemption story. The Steelers had clawed their way back from irrelevance, led by quarterback Neil O'Donnell and a young defense featuring future Hall of Famer Rod Woodson. They weren't the Steel Curtain, but they were scrappy, determined, and hungry. On the other sideline, Dallas had been reborn. Jerry Jones had bought the team in 1989 and immediately fired Tom Landry, ending an era with the kind of ruthlessness Landry himself would have appreciated. Jones hired Jimmy Johnson, a college coach who rebuilt the Cowboys through the draft. Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, the triplets. But Johnson and Jones couldn't coexist. After back-to-back championships in 1992 and 1993, Johnson left. Barry Switzer replaced him, a laid-back, easygoing coach who was everything Johnson wasn't. And now, Switzer had a chance to prove he could win the big one. The game started as a battle. Pittsburgh's defense kept Dallas in check. O'Donnell moved the ball efficiently. The Steelers had a legitimate chance to win their first championship since 1980. But then, Larry Brown changed everything. Brown was Dallas's cornerback, a solid but unspectacular player who'd spent his career in the shadows. But on this day, he became a Super Bowl legend. Second half, Pittsburgh driving. O'Donnell dropped back and threw toward the sideline. Larry Brown stepped in front. Interception. Dallas converted it into a touchdown. The momentum shifted. Pittsburgh tried to respond, but minutes later, O'Donnell threw again, and Larry Brown intercepted him again. Another Cowboys touchdown. Game over. Dallas 27, Pittsburgh 17. Larry Brown, the unheralded cornerback, was named Super Bowl MVP. The Cowboys had their third championship in 4 years. O'Donnell's 2 interceptions had destroyed their championship dream. Fans wondered if he'd choked, if the moment had been too big. As Dallas celebrated, Emmitt Smith, the league's rushing champion, stood on the podium holding the trophy. Troy Aikman, the polished Pro Bowl quarterback, smiled for cameras. But this time, there was no rematch on the horizon. The rivalry had peaked in the 1970s. Super Bowl XXX wasn't the climax, it was the epilogue, a postscript written by different characters in a story that had already been told. The fury was gone. The personal hatred had faded. What remained was history, not warfare. And yet, even in this final meeting, the fundamental truth remained. These two franchises, built on opposing philosophies, had defined what excellence looked like in the NFL. The numbers tell part of the story. 3 Super Bowl meetings, 20 Hall of Famers, 2 dynasties that dominated across multiple decades. But the numbers don't capture what made this rivalry transcendent. Pittsburgh represented the working class, the blue-collar ethos, the lunch-pail mentality that said championships weren't won with flash, they were won with blood and sweat. When NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle offered the America's Team nickname to the Steelers after Super Bowl X, Art Rooney declined. "We didn't want that," Rooney said. "We're Pittsburgh's team. We feel strongly about that." Dallas represented glamour, precision, the idea that football could be engineered, calculated, perfected. They embraced the America's Team moniker. They wanted the spotlight. Joe Green later reflected on the difference. "We didn't need to say we were the best. We would just go out on the field and get the job done." Both philosophies worked. Both philosophies created dynasties. But only one could define the decade. Pittsburgh won 4 championships in 6 years during the 1970s. Dallas won 2 in the same span, then added 3 more in the 1990s. The Steelers owned the 1970s statistically, but the Cowboys' mystique, the silver and blue, the star, the image, transcended wins and losses. Chuck Noll retired in 1991 after 23 seasons with 4 Super Bowl rings and a legacy as one of the greatest coaches in NFL history. He never sought attention. He built something that lasted. Tom Landry was fired in 1989 after 29 seasons, a move that shocked the football world. His flex defense and innovation had revolutionized the game. But empires don't last forever. Terry Bradshaw became a broadcaster, eventually winning multiple Emmy Awards. He joked about his intelligence, turned Hollywood Henderson's insult into a punchline and proved that success is the ultimate revenge. Years later, he'd reflect, "When somebody questions your intelligence, it gives you an unbelievable drive to prove them wrong." Lynn Swann never forgot Cliff Harris's trash talk before Super Bowl X. That game, that moment, defined his career. He proved intimidation doesn't work when you have courage. Harris's pre-game psychological warfare had backfired so spectacularly that it became a cautionary tale. A lesson Hollywood Henderson apparently never learned 3 years later. And Jackie Smith? He never spoke much about the dropped pass in Super Bowl XIII. Some wounds don't heal. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1994, 2 years before Super Bowl XXX. But when reporters asked about his career, the dropped pass always came up. Always. The rivalry produced 3 of the greatest Super Bowls ever played. It showcased 20 future Hall of Famers. It defined what it meant to be dominant in the NFL. But more than that, it represented something bigger. 2 contrasting philosophies: grit versus polish, anonymity versus celebrity, steel curtain versus America's team, battling for supremacy in front of the entire country. Pittsburgh won more championships in the 1970s, but Dallas captured something intangible. They became the team everyone loved or hated, the team that transcended football. And when they met one final time in 1996, it proved both franchises knew how to rebuild, how to reinvent, how to rise from the ashes. Both won, both lost, both left scars. And 50 years later, when fans debate the greatest dynasty of all time, the argument still rages. Steelers fans point to being the first to 6 rings. Cowboys fans point to 5 rings across 3 decades and mystique that never faded. Neither side will ever concede, because this rivalry wasn't just about football. It was about identity. 3 Super Bowls, 20 Hall of Famers, 2 franchises that refused to back down. And in the end, both teams proved the same truth. Greatness isn't just about winning. It's about how you win, who you represent, and what you leave behind. Pittsburgh left championships. Dallas left mystique. Both left legends. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit subscribe for more sports history. Drop a comment. Which rivalry should we cover next?